We still have people signing on. I'm still trying to get chat enabled. I apologize for that. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of housekeeping stuff so we can get the ball rolling. We have what I think is a great webinar for you guys today. And I'm going to do a little housekeeping information, and then Suzanne Messenger is going to do some introductions. Like I said, I am excited and overwhelmed with the number of registrants we had and the number of participants we have showing up. I want to let you know the webinar is being recorded and will be made available to you. Please make sure your microphone is muted. Please ask any questions in the Q&A area for right now. We'll try to fill those. If we can't get them done during the webinar, we'll try to answer those after the fact. Again, chat is still disabled, not on purpose, but I have not been able to get it re-enabled at this point. It was approved for 3 CEUs for social work, 3.6 CEUs for nursing, and everyone will receive a certificate of attendance by mail within the next 2 weeks. Access to the webinar recording and PowerPoint slides will be made available to you to email with your certificate. And at the end of this, we're going to have an evaluation. If you have time to complete that at the end of the session today, I would love that. If not, I will send the link in the email as well, and we can go from there and get everybody, because the more feedback we get, the better opportunity we have to give you best training in future webinars as well. So like I said, we've got a great webinar set up today, and I'm going to turn things over to Suzanne Messenger, who is our state ombudsman, and she is going to introduce the webinar and our first presenter. Suzanne.
Thanks, Susan. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We're so excited you're able to join us and have an interest in learning more about trauma-informed care and the ways that it can benefit your residents. I'm the state long-term care ombudsman. I work at the Bureau of Senior Services. I'm sure most of you are familiar with our long-term care ombudsman. The Bureau contracts with Legal Aid of West Virginia, who provides our local ombudsman services. There are 12 local ombudsmen, including Susan. So we're really excited to be with you today. We help people who live in the long-term care facilities, either with concerns or complaints about their care. We also provide a lot of education and can be a good resource for folks. So if you haven't talked with your ombudsman, please put them in your tool belt. They're a great resource for your residents and you all too. October is kind of a special month for our ombudsman. It's actually a long-term care resident rights month. So I thought, by way of introduction this morning, I'd like to read a proclamation from Governor Justice proclaiming October as National Resident Rights Month here in West Virginia. Proclamation by Governor Justice. Whereas there are nearly 15,000 West Virginians living in 414 nursing homes, assisted living, and other residential care facilities in West Virginia, and whereas the Federal Nursing Home Reform Act of West Virginia and state law guarantees residents their individual rights in order to promote and maintain their dignity and autonomy, and whereas all residents should be aware of their rights so they may be empowered to live with dignity and self-determination, and whereas we wish to honor and celebrate these citizens, to recognize their rich individuality and reaffirm their right to vote and participate politically, including the right to have a say in their care, and whereas individuals and groups across the country will be celebrating Residents' Rights Month with the theme this year, Inspiring Unity Within Our Community, emphasizing the importance of fostering meaningful community within the facility and encouraging residents' connection to their local communities. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Jim Justice, Governor of the great state of West Virginia, do hereby proclaim October 22nd, 2022 as National Long-Term Care Resident Rights Month in the Mountain State, and encourage all citizens to join me in this observance. Providing trauma-informed care can really help all of us empower residents to exercise their rights and give them the confidence to exercise those rights in a safe environment based on their own needs and their own histories. So I'm very pleased this morning to welcome two experts on long-term care and on the topic to help educate us and inform us and have a robust discussion. So I'm going to start by introducing Teepa Mayer. Teepa is the current director of the Office of Health Facility Licensure and Certification, which is a division of the Department of Health and Human Resources. Teepa became the director in June of 2022, but don't worry, she's got a lot of experience prior to that. Prior to that, she was the director of the nursing home program with OFLAC for many years. The nursing home OFLAC program is tasked with conducting certification inspections for Medicare and Medicaid, and also investigating complaints made on behalf of long-term care residents. So Teepa, we're very happy you're here today, and without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. I am going to talk today. I'm going to try to share my screen here. I hope everyone can see the PowerPoint. If you can't, speak up. But I'm going to talk today about the new regulations that are coming, that have come out as part of the phased-in update to the federal regulations that they did quite a few years ago. And as we know, the pandemic really hampered or impeded the implementation of some of these regulations. So I'm going to talk about what is going to be expected of nursing homes moving forward for trauma-informed care. And we'll see if I can, there we go. So the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services released guidance on new requirements related to trauma-informed care. And this is related to, if you're familiar with nursing home regulations, they have tag numbers and they start with an F, and this is F699, and it's trauma-informed care. And it requires the facility must ensure that residents who are trauma survivors receive culturally competent, trauma-informed care in accordance with professional standards of practice and accounting for residents' experiences and preferences in order to eliminate or mitigate triggers that may cause re-traumatization of the resident. And I want to apologize if you hear noise in the background. Our building upstairs is going through a major construction, and at times it can get a little noisy. Importantly, studies have shown that 70% of adults in the United States have experienced some type of traumatic event, and there is a direct correlation between trauma and physical health conditions. And I would say that the numbers of folks residing in nursing homes, that number is much higher for folks that have some sort of trauma that they have survived in their life. So the federal regulations define some key terms. They define trauma and trauma-informed care. Trauma results from an event, series of events, or a set of circumstances, may be physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, has lasting adverse effects on an individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. Trauma-informed care is the approach we take to deliver care that involves understanding, recognizing, and responding to the effects of all types of trauma, recognizing the widespread impact, the signs and symptoms of trauma in residents, and avoiding re-traumatization. So the intent of the regulation is basically to ensure facilities deliver care and services which meet professional standards, use approaches which are culturally competent, account for residents' experiences and preferences, and address the needs of trauma survivors. And trauma survivors can be military veterans, survivors of disasters, survivors of abuse, people that have a history of homelessness or imprisonment or institutionalization, survivors of accidents, illness, or some sort of medical condition, survivors of crime and violence, traumatic loss of a loved one, or even separation from a loved one. And it affects all walks of life. It affects all ages, all cultures, all socioeconomic status. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. You can experience trauma and wounding in your life that can have long-lasting effects. So triggers and re-traumatization. Facilities must identify triggers which may re-traumatize residents with a history of trauma. A trigger is a psychological stimulus that prompts recall of a previous traumatic event, even if the stimulus itself is not traumatic or frightening. The regulations provide some more definitions. One is on culture and cultural competence. Culture is basically the conceptual system that structures the way people view the world. It's a set of beliefs, norms, and values. Cultural competence is a developmental process in which individuals or institutions achieve increasing levels of awareness, knowledge, and skills, along with a cultural competence continuum. So some key elements of non-compliance, facilities, if a facility failed to do one of the following, they may be considered out of compliance with the regulation. If they don't identify the cultural preferences of a resident and honor those preferences who are trauma survivors, they may be identified as failing to meet compliance with this regulation. If they fail to identify residents' past history of trauma or what triggers would cause re-traumatization, or if they, don't use approaches that are culturally competent and or trauma informed. So I talked about so far the regulation that's at 699 that's just labeled trauma-informed care. Trauma-informed care has also been updated. They updated the area of comprehensive care plans in the regulation to address trauma-informed care in those plans. So the regulation is basically the services provided or arranged by the facility as outlined by the comprehensive care plan must be culturally competent and trauma-informed. So that's new. The regulation intent is to ensure each resident's person-centered comprehensive care plan includes approaches that address the resident's cultural preferences and reflects trauma-informed care when appropriate. So for care plans, when reviewing a resident's care plan, the surveyor should determine if the care plan describes the resident's cultural preferences, values, and practices, includes approaches to meet the resident's cultural needs and preferences, and for residents with a history of trauma, if the care plan describes interventions accounting for the resident's experiences and preferences in order to eliminate or mitigate triggers that may cause re-traumatization. For care planning to address trauma and cultural preferences, facilities should collaborate with the resident, the survivor of the trauma, family, friends, other healthcare professionals to obtain a history of what that trauma is. And also to identify triggers which may re-traumatize the resident and develop interventions to decrease or mitigate exposure to triggers. It is important for facility staff to understand the cultural preferences of the individual and how they impact the delivery of care. With regard to care planning to address cultural needs and preferences, nursing home staff should consider aspects of cultural preferences, which may include the way a person communicates, the way their food is prepared, or the types of food they can or cannot consume, clothing preferences, physical contact or provision of care by a person of the opposite sex, cultural etiquette, including like volume of voice, eye contact, handshaking. It could be all kinds of different etiquette that are preferences that are culturally appropriate for the person. There are a couple other federal regulations that surveyors may investigate if they find that a facility is not in compliance with these regulations. One is at F726 for concerns related to the knowledge, competencies, or skills of nursing staff to provide culturally competent and trauma-informed care. And the one at F742 for concerns related to treatment and services for a resident with a history of trauma and or post-traumatic stress disorder. So just kind of to sum up what I've talked about here is that there are 2 new tags or parts of new federal regulations under the phase 3 requirements under CMS's big overhaul of the federal regulations that have happened before the pandemic. Definitions have been included for key terms associated with cultural competence and trauma-informed care. There are key elements of non-compliance have been developed to direct surveyors when to cite deficient practices. And they've also talked about other, for specific federal regulations or tags that could be cited under this area. And the last page, and I will send this presentation out to Suzanne so she can get it to everybody. But on the last page, it's just my contact information. And for now, if you need to, I am the director of OFLAC, but I'm also still covering the nursing home program. So if you would have any questions, you could feel free to contact me. And I'm going to see if I can stop sharing. There we go. And that's what I have, Suzanne.
Thank you so much, Tina. This really provides a good foundation for the rest of our discussion. We're so happy you were able to join us today.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
So now it is my pleasure to introduce Melanie Bunn. Melanie is a speaker and mentor with Teepa Snow's Positive Approach to Care. Melanie received her undergraduate degree in nursing from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, her master's degree in family health nursing from Clemson University with a postmaster's gerontological nurse practitioner certificate from Duke University. She's a skilled and experienced advanced practice nurse and nurse educator, conducting over 200 presentations and trainings annually to health professionals, community organizations, first responders, families, and others. She enjoys improving the lives of people living with dementia, their families, and other care partners. Melanie, we're so happy you're able to join us this morning and really looking forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. And it's nice to be with all of you. Last time I was in West Virginia was last summer, and I went to see a James Taylor concert. So I have fond memories of West Virginia and wish I was there in person with you. But the reality is, if I were there with you in person, we probably wouldn't all be there. So it's good to be with you. And this Zoom option gives us a lot of chance to kind of be together when maybe we couldn't. So I am grateful to be spending some time with you talking about this really important topic. I would love for this to really be a conversation. So I know that your options for communicating with me are a little limited, but I see many of you are using that Q&A, and we're going to continue to use that as we go through. So I want to take a minute, and I want to have my friend and colleague Rachel kind of share her screen. Share her picture with us and kind of introduce yourself, Rachel.
Well, hello, I'm Rachel, and I'm actually in Oklahoma, and I am a friend and primary contact support for a lot of people living with dementia around the nation and actually a couple around the world. So I've had the great privilege of supporting them on their journeys, both personally and professionally, and really learning from them and getting an insider's view into their perspective on the journey of living with dementia.
So Rachel is here because she's got this experience and this passion and this commitment to people living with dementia. And a lot of that is she has great skills. So she has had a lot of practice and learned a lot of things that are helpful. So that's kind of how I'm going to be using her today. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. There's no telling what's going to come up because you just, as much as I try to get everything organized, I sometimes wind up in a different place than I thought I was going to be. So here we are. So the company that I'm involved with is Teepa Snow company, Positive Approach to Care. And our focus really is people living with dementia. And we support all people with brain change. And so part of trauma care is involved with people whose brains have changed because of something that's happened to them in their life. And so we kind of embrace them under our umbrella of service as well. So for the slides for this presentation, you can go to the teepasnow.com presentations, and it's possible that Rachel might put that into the chat, but I don't know if she has the power in the way Zoom is set up to do that. But go ahead and take a photograph of this. When was the last time you had a speaker tell you, get out your phones? So I'm going to say, get out your phones and actually take a picture of that. And that's where you'll be able to get our slides for a while. Oh, so it looks like, Susan, you unmuted and you showed us your picture. Are you going to put that in the chat?
I will put that in the chat, and then it will also be in the follow-up email that comes as well with the recording information and their certificates of attendance.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for that. That makes
No
it much
problem.
easier. I appreciate that.
No problem.
So thanks for that. So we're talking about trauma-informed care. And so our objectives are to talk about the impact of trauma and secondary trauma on the life and function of residents in the long-term care setting. We're going to talk about in-the-moment strategies that anybody can use for responding and for providing support. So things that you can use in the moment. I'm going to mention some of those bigger programs, bigger projects, bigger strategies, but we're going to really focus on those in the moment kinds of things that are happening. And we're also going to talk about specifically, because it's my heart, my calling, my mission, my ministry, specifically about people living with dementia. So those are kind of the basics. So I found this definition. I love the definition that she gave, but this one caught me in a little bit different way. So take a moment and just look at that definition. Trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident, rape, or national disaster. Immediately after the event, shock and denial are typical. Longer term reactions include unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, strained relationships, physical symptoms like headaches and nausea. While the feelings are normal, some people have difficulty moving on with their lives, and psychologists can help them find constructive ways. And other people can do that as well. So we take that definition and we broaden it from rape or natural disaster to things like loss of a loved one, to things like, well, I'm gonna let y'all, I'm gonna stop for a minute and I'm gonna have y'all drop into the chat. What are some other things that the participants, the residents, the people that you've worked with, what are some other things in there for most of your people, 60, 70, 80, 90 years of life? What other situations, experiences have been traumatic for them? So just drop it in there, all the kinds of things that you can think of.
Well, the first one was military, then having to come to a nursing home, then sexual abuse, loss of a child, domestic violence, loss of independence, deaths of family members, loss of spouse, history of being abused as a child, house fire, rapid decline in function, deaths of family members, new health condition, history of being removed from the home, death, Holocaust, war, being away from friends and family during COVID, poverty, loss of independence, home, and animals, death of multiple family members in a short time period, gunshot to the head from ex-husband, loss of pet, COVID outbreak, memory loss, unable to perform self-care and toileting.
So, and I agree with all of those. So I almost think that this is going to apply to everybody we work with, because I don't know very many people who in their lives haven't been through some of those experiences. And the other piece of it is, how did you cope with that? How did you cope with that huge loss, or that huge experience, or that huge crises, trauma? Living here in North Carolina, we have hurricanes, and when they start talking about it on the Weather Channel, and now the Weather Channel is 24 hours, 7 days a week now, people really have those flashback kind of experiences of huge hurricanes that were devastating for them in their history. Other things that are popping in, Rachel?
Yeah, some more. So we had betrayal. We had multi-generational families with history of physical and sexual abuse across each generation. We had witnessing violence. We had new amputation and inability to adjust to changes, elderly drug abuse, loss of position in community or family, living with someone with substance abuse, sexual abuse during time served in military, mining disasters, abandonment.
So the list just grows and grows and grows, and the burden of that just grows and grows and grows. And that's the secondary trauma. The secondary trauma is, so if you scan through that list, just drop into the chat your feelings at just reading that list of horrible things that have happened to people. How do you feel as a person who chose to go into a caring profession? So just drop your feelings, your responses into the chat.
Well, the first two were overwhelmed, and the next two were saddened, another overwhelmed, guilt, sad,
And
angry.
so that's the issue of secondary trauma.
Hopelessness, loss of trust in others. And a good point, if the caregiver has gone through the same traumatic thing, then it can bring their emotions back to them. Anxiety and insomnia. Compassion fatigue.
Yeah, so there's a lot of burden here in being with people who have not only been through trauma and crisis, but because of where they are developmentally, and because of where they are in their lives, are doing a lot of review and reflection. So there's some thought that life review, that developmentally what older people, and realizing that some of you have younger people in your communities as well, but that older people doing that life review often will go back to, so do this with me. Shh. So there's a lot of this generation was taught, just shove it down. You know, a lot of this generation was taught, don't talk about it. You know, don't tell anybody, don't talk about your feelings, don't talk about the experience that you went through, just shove it down. My so many stories. I was talking with a lady who had been gang raped as a young girl, and she was, I mean, all the things you read about with rape, you know, she was shamed. Why did you go home from school that way? You know, why didn't you tell the boys no? All of the things you hear about rape and don't tell anybody because nobody will ever marry you. If they know that you're so dirty and you're so contaminated, nobody will ever marry you if you tell anybody. So what she did was she shoved all of those feelings down. And when she got close to the end of her life, she could no longer keep those feelings shoved out. So they came out in some really scary, horrible ways. She would have these vicious nightmares. She would have these vicious hallucinations of these men in her room. And the trauma that she experienced was devastating for her. And so how do we support her? And hopefully as we go through this time that we have together, we'll come up with some strategies. So we may come back to her as we spend some time going through this. So first thing I want you to do is we are going to take care of ourselves. So take a deep breath. Go ahead, Rachel, take a deep breath. And you need this too. And let it out. Take a big yawn and a stretch. Everybody's doing this. I can't see you, but I trust that you are. And then roll your shoulders back 3 times. 1, 2, 3, and shake it out. Because these are hard topics, and it's the life that we chose. It's the career that we chose, but it also is hard. So I work with students often, and a while ago, I was sharing with a student that the staff where we were having clinical were struggling. So I had my group of students. I said, the people that the people who work here are struggling. And the reason they're struggling is because 3 people who were really important to them, 3 of the participants, have died within a really small period of time. And those 3 people weren't people that they were expecting to die. They weren't people who were in the hospice end of life program. They weren't people who we called the families in because it was impending. These were people who just kind of randomly over a very short period of time died. And so the staff, what do you think the staff were experiencing? What do you think they were going through after these 3 deaths of these 3 people who were very important to them, and it was unexpected? So just drop it in the chat. What do you think the staff were experiencing? Or in the Q&A, I think is where you have to put it. I don't think you can put it in the chat. So just drop it into the Q&A. What do you think the staff were going through?
Grief. Going over what could have been done to prevent it, depression, loss, grief and loss.
So and would you say maybe some trauma?
Shock, even anger. Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of a combination of all of those things. Yes, there was some guilt. One woman had mentioned some shoulder pain, and someone had responded, "Oh, we'll do some hot heat packs," and she died of a cardiovascular event. But she also had bad shoulders, so who knows? So the sense of guilt and the sense of grief and the sense of loss was really important. So what the student said to me, one of the students in this group, I see some other things popping up. Other things to add, Rachel?
Well, there was desperation, survivor's guilt, unable to express their own feelings.
Yeah. So what one of the students said to me was, well, and it wasn't in, so take a deep breath because this is going to be very offensive. But she didn't mean it in an offensive way. She meant it in a confused, curious, inexperienced kind of way. And she said, but aren't all the people here who work here expect that all of the people they work with are going to die? So why was it so hard? Because we kind of knew it was going to happen, and we knew it was likely to happen. So Rachel, what do you think my student meant by that. I'm gonna ask you to unmute and talk with me for a minute.
I think she was probably trying to kind of make sense of it. And I think she was kind of like, well, if you're in a nursing home or whatever, then that's kind of why they're there, right? So why would you be attached and why would you be surprised? But I think she was trying to figure out kind of like what's happening and why and that sort of thing.
And I really agree with you. I really didn't, it was at some level hurtful and offensive, but also considering the source. You know, that this is someone who hasn't had a lot of clinical experience, hasn't got a lot of the word I keep coming up with this experience, but it's something more than that. She hasn't had it intimately part of her life. So she didn't have that sense of what was really going on. So I think that idea of secondary trauma is something that we are going to have to really be able to pay attention to deal with it both for ourselves and to support the people around us. So in that situation, I think what the staff was going through was a primary trauma. They were experiencing loss. They were experiencing some real intense, and for some of them, it might have actually brought back some re-traumatization of some other times in their life where they've lost other people. So that reliving times, that was kind of the re-traumatization of my people who went through the hurricane. And that secondary trauma for me was kind of supporting other people. It brought back some of that into my frame of reference. So this is something I found this model really neat, and there's I've got a reference for you for it. But this is talking about the 5 kind of keystones of trauma-informed care. And it's safety, choice, collaboration, trustworthiness, and empowerment. So if we kind of put those together and kind of hold on to those as our reference point as we're moving forward, I think that will give us kind of a model that might be actually really helpful for all care, not just trauma-enforced care. So let's move on. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the impact of trauma from a physical, emotional, communication, and spiritual kind of approaches. So I'm going to ask y'all to drop into the chat, because I don't want to give you things you already know. What are some of the physical impacts of trauma that you've seen in the people that you work with, or in yourself if you've experienced trauma? What are some of the physical impacts of trauma? And just kind of drop those in the chat.
Weight loss, headaches,
Or what else could it be? Weight loss or
weight gain,
weight gain? It could be either. Yeah, it could be either weight loss or weight gain. What else are they dropping in, Rachel?
nightmares, withdrawal, body aches, upset stomach, depression, crying, pain in various parts of the body, withdrawal from friends and family and surroundings, anxiety, exhaustion, increase in blood pressure, lowered or compromised immune system, afraid of going out in public, appearance, back pain, insomnia, tension, fear, nail biting, loss of interest in anything, agitation, suicidal ideations.
So we went way beyond physical. And that's okay, because we're going to talk about all of those things as well. So the physical things, did anybody drop in their sleep?
Yes.
Okay, so sleep was in there. Did pain get dropped into there?
Yes.
So pain, and then did problems managing pain get dropped into there?
I'm not sure. We got some more. We got self-isolation, physical aggression, behaviors, decreased appetite,
Okay.
physical illnesses.
Cool. So all of those kinds of things we have to do to stay healthy. So eating and drinking. So it might be drinking too much, or substance abuse is associated with trauma as well. And I put that kind of in that part of that physical thing. Pain, but it's not just pain. It's trouble managing pain. It's trouble getting control of the pain. It's trouble staying on top of the pain, identifying what the source is, and then finding the strategies that really work with it. So physical kinds of changes really important. And we also got some emotional ones in there. So I heard some things like anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation and other kinds of things like that. And yes, those are the emotional. Now I use the word communication. And I think some people are dropping some other words in there that might fit under the label that I use as communication, because I see in there words like physical aggression and behaviors. And I would use those words as communication. So let me, I'm gonna pull up something. I'm gonna share my screen. And I know I haven't shared it yet. I'm getting to the one that I wanted. Alrighty, so I am ready to share now. So get one of your staff reach out to you and they say, you know, Matthew just knocked the crap out of me. And I don't know why. It was just right out of the blue. I have no idea why it happened. So drop into the chat. Do y'all get those kinds of approaches, comments? Do people say those kinds of things to you? You know, somebody just hit me and it was right out of the blue. I have no idea what was happening. It just happened right out of the blue. Do people say those kinds of things where you work, or do you hear those kinds of things?
You're getting yeses.
Yes. So let me share with you. This is a demonstration. My son and I are out on our back porch, and I was kind of telling him about this call that I had gotten and the description that I had gotten of what happened, and we kind of reenacted it. So here's what happened. Hey Matthew, hey.
Oh, what?
Oh, I'm sorry.
What? Go.
Oops, sorry, I'm hitting the wrong button. And at that point, the person swung. So drop into the chat what you think might have happened at that moment.
Maybe he was startled. Maybe defensive. Person was startled, limited communication skills and abilities to process sensory information, surprised, entered into his personal space. He was approached from behind and touched. Possible history of physical abuse, caught off guard, scared, triggered, poor approach from the other person, shocked and on defense mode. She should not have come from the behind and touched him. It startled him, maybe hard of hearing.
So what happened, if you look at it from the perspective of the person who was approaching? So Rachel, if you'll unmute for me for a minute. So we've got a lot of things about Matthew's perspective. So Matthew's perspective was, what happened? He was just what, Rachel?
He was walking.
He was walking along, and then what happened to him? You've got lots of cues here in the
Well, a
chat.
lot of people are saying that someone came up from behind and touched him, and there she was.
So somebody came up from behind, touched him, and he wasn't expecting it. He got startled. And so what part of his brain do you think activated in that moment?
I think the surprise factor, but it wasn't a good surprise. So I'm thinking it's probably the limbic system of the fright or the fight. And so probably went fright, fight like that. And then I don't know what it is. I need to get it away, and defending himself.
Yeah. So he went panic mode. He went, something happened. So everybody do this with me. Rotate your hand like this. And this is, I'm aware of things around me. And now move halfway up. And this is the things around me are not just there, they're feeling kind of risky. And then move up to here, they're beyond aware, they're beyond risky. This is feeling dangerous. And so in that moment, Matthew started out kind of aware. And what he missed was that risky. He went straight to what? Dangerous. And we're going to talk about why those kinds of things might happen. So that's what happened from Matthew's perspective. Something touched him. He wasn't expecting it. He had a normal human response to that, which was protect myself. And because of, as we explored what had happened to this particular person, it became really clear that it really was based in some trauma that he had had in his life, where he had been attacked. So then his response was even more intense. So Rachel, what do you think why do you think the caregiver didn't process that all in that moment?
They were probably too busy being hit and trying to defend themselves, because then it's a surprise to them too, not a good surprise. And then they would go into automatic defense mode, I'm guessing, or trying to get away or whatever.
Yeah. So the care partner, what happened to her before? Was she aware of what was going on?
Yeah,
Yeah, because how many times do you think she's interacted with Matthew?
it's been fine before.
It's been fine before. There's never been any problem. This happened right out of the blue. And so from her perspective, she did what she always does, which is what?
Come up from behind and tap him on the shoulder, and it's all good.
Call Matthew's name and just start her approach with him. And she'd gotten away with that over time, because do you think Matthew's a person who spends a lot of time sitting down? No,
Well, I think he's walking and walking.
he's walking and walking and walking. And so she's done this kind of thing and gotten away with it over and over and over and over again. And in this particular moment, what happened?
All of a sudden, it wasn't okay anymore.
It wasn't okay anymore. So she got a surprise and a startle because of what happened to Matthew turning around and swinging at her. She wasn't expecting that because that wasn't part of her experience. I left out another piece of this story. The other piece of this story is that care partner hit him back. Now, I'm going to take a moment and kind of sit with that. Take a moment and kind of sit with that. Now drop into the chat. What are some of your emotional responses and some of your thought responses and some of your interpretations of what her perspective might be?
Well, the first thing that came up was caregiver could have had her own trauma, or maybe history of abuse from caregiver. Angry, concerned, just a reaction or reflex. At first angry at the caregiver, but then maybe it was an abusive relationship and maybe it triggered her to fight back. So maybe there was a trigger. What relation is the caregiver? Fight or flight? When two people have the same issue, the situation can easily escalate. No reaction, just emotionally numb.
And yes.
Then another person said that they had a caregiver tell them that when Mom swung at her, and her natural response was to swing back, but she didn't want to hurt the mother and fear.
Yeah, so we've got these two kinds of perspectives. We've got one perspective, which our normal human response to being attacked or hit or swung at is to protect ourselves. Now, in the demonstration that I did, when he came back like this, my natural response was to what? To move back and kind of to pull in and move out. So fight, fright, flight. My response was to move back. Some people, their natural response is to hit back to protect themselves. That is not okay. You did not hear me say we should no, that is not okay, because we talked about this. So everybody put your hand right here. This is your prefrontal cortex. This is your ability to control your impulses. This is your ability to take a lot of information and quickly come to an accurate, logical response. So what happens, what should happen, what needs to happen, put your hand right here, put the other one up here. So what we have the ability to do as care partners, is to take this part of our brain and shove this back down. Because we can't have care partners hitting people. We can't, no. You did not hear me say that's okay. So that's one interpretation, one possibility. And that's what it looked like initially. What it looked like initially was that it had been a reflex to protect herself. And as we explored what really had happened, it became more evident that she had been beaten and physically abused in her life by a man, and her response to him swinging at her was to swing back to try to protect herself. She still got fired. She still lost her job. She still can't be allowed to hit residents or participants. We still can't have that. And it just kind of changed the way we understood the environment. We understood the situation. Do you think there's got to be a better way of keeping everybody safe? I do. And so let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and take a look at another approach. So what I'm going to do, I shared my screen. I am going to back this up a little bit, and let's show a different approach with some different skill and see what happens.
Hey. Oh, hey. Oh, hey. Hey.
So I'm going to pause. We're going to go back and look at, oops, I keep pausing the wrong. I'm going to pause, and we're going to talk about, what did you see that was different that time? What was different in that approach with the care partner and the person? This particular person was living with dementia. This particular person is my son, who's now a college junior, but we'll just let that go. What did you notice?
Well, it was not confrontational. The approach was from the front. It was friendly. She ensured she was seen, gave the resident time to process. It appeared she was trained to approach correctly. She made herself aware, relaxed, approached him from a distance, gave him time to process and react. No surprise appearance. Calm and friendly, approached him from the front.
Cool. So let's go back.
Ooh, offered hand to offered touch.
Woohoo. So she gave him, so we think about some of those other things it talked about. It talked about giving people control over their environment and the ability to kind of be in charge. So I am going to show this again, and we're going to kind of take it apart a little bit. We're going to look at what are some of the skills, what are some of the things that we're seeing here. So I'm going to pause it a couple of times. So there's Matthew. Oops, we don't want to. So Matthew is still walking along. He's still doing the thing. What was I able to do this time, Rachel? What do you see me doing this time?
So you're walking around him faster to get ahead to come in from the front.
Yeah, so I'm coming around to get in front of him. And why do you think that might be important?
Well, this way you're not going to scare him. You're going to be where he can see you. You're not going to be coming from behind.
I'm not going to be coming from behind him. I'm not going to scare him. So the next thing I do. So what happened there?
So I heard you knocking.
Okay, so why do you think I knocked, Rachel?
To get his attention because now he's looking for something.
Okay, so I knocked to get, so if I were coming in your office, or if I were coming in your room, or if I were coming in your house, what would I do?
You knock.
I would knock. And basically that knock is asking for permission, right? It's a very common, very over conditioned, but knock knock means I'm asking for permission to come into your space. So even though we're outside, there really isn't a room to go into. There still is space to go into. So that knock knock gets that automatic somebody's coming. So what would happen if I didn't have a wall right there? What would happen if I just went knock knock? It's
So I'm wondering if it's asking permission, but is it also a way to alert him that someone is there? So it's
Yeah.
kind of a nice way and an automatic way of letting him know there's someone here, just to be aware first, and then you can keep going.
Yeah, so it's kind of a knock to give him that chance to know, that chance to respond, that chance to give me permission or not give me permission. So he heard knock knock, and where did he start looking? Was he looking right at me? Did he look right where the knock knock was? Mm-mm. So we, in the US, we read from left to right. So we tend to scan from left to right because we've been taught that pattern with reading. So we tend to scan from left to right. So he kind of hears knock knock and he starts scanning. And then he eventually
Hey.
finds me. And when he finds me, where am I? Am I right in front of him or somewhere else? What do you think, Rachel?
You look like you're a little bit off to the side at an angle to him.
So I'm off to the side and I'm at an angle to him. Do you think that's better for him or not?
Yeah, because he's still got, you're not blocking him in his path that he's walking. So you're kind of off to the side and then you're kind of an object to pay attention to.
So I'm an object to pay attention to, but I'm not kind of blocking him.
So as someone said, it's less confrontational.
Yeah, it is less confrontational because this kind of standing in front of somebody like this, even if I were in front of him, I could still create some of that sense of drama, trauma kinds of things. And somebody actually did this. Somebody actually said, you know, I offered my hand instead of touching him. So now he's got a choice, doesn't he? He can choose to reach out and shake my hand or not. But most likely, what is he likely to do? He's most likely to what? To shake hands with me, because that is the overlearned motor skill. When I give you this visual cue, your overlearned visual motor response is to shake hands with me. So we shake hands and that's really going well. Oh, and really quickly there, you saw something, and we're going to work on this a little bit later. But notice while we've got this tape up, this part of this grid, notice what I did really, really quickly with my hand. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. And then I over to the side. And
Hey.
we keep going. So I'm going to stop. Oops, I better stop the video or else it'll keep going.
While you're doing that, some people were saying that you're at a safe distance. You were not in his space. You were not in front as it is oppositional. You are going to lead him away with your hand, and then placing your hand on his elbow, you're leading him somewhere else.
Yeah, so I can kind of support him and move him and direct him. Did I try to change where he was going, or did I kind of go along with him?
You waited until he accepted you.
Nice. So I am going to do something that doesn't happen often on Zoom, and I'm going to ask Suzanne, and I'm going to ask, is it Susan and Suzanne? I think it's Susan and Suzanne. I'm going to ask Susan and Suzanne if y'all have clothes on, to turn on your to turn on your cameras as well. And the reason I say that is because it has happened to me that I've asked people to do what I'm going to ask them to do, and they didn't have appropriate clothing on. Because how many times when you're on Zoom do you expect to be asked to, everybody together, stand up? I've got Susan and Suzanne, and I've got Rachel, and I've got me, and I am hoping, and I can't see you, but I am hoping, because it doesn't matter if the rest of y'all have clothes on, because I can't see you. But everybody, the lady who stood up, she was nicely dressed from the waist up, but she had on like bikini bottom short kinds of things, and you just know she didn't remember that when she stood up, because she kind of went like this. It was I think it was traumatic for her, actually. I think she will for now have some PTSD when she goes to a Zoom call. I think that emotional memory stuck for her. And I don't want to minimize the impact of trauma. I don't want to minimize that not everything creates a real intense traumatic moment, but emotional memories stick in a different way. So what I'm gonna have y'all do is, it looks like, kind of step back from your screen a little bit. And I'm asking everybody to do this, even if I can't see you. So step back, and we're going to go through some of these steps. And I hope those of you on the Zoom call are doing this as well. So we're going to start with the knock knock. So if I knock knock, my screen will fall down. So I'm actually going to say knock knock, and then I'm going to shift to the side like this. Now, you didn't see me do this in the film. And the reason you didn't see me start this way in the film was because COVID has made a difference. Does COVID make a difference? COVID has made some differences, and I'll share that with you in just a minute. So knock, knock, and then so this is my left shoulder. My left shoulder is facing the camera. So Susan and Suzanne, just kind of shift that right shoulder back a little bit so your left shoulder is kind of facing it. And now Susan and Suzanne, I love that y'all have names I can remember. Susan and Suzanne and Rachel, look where Rachel's hand is. Look where my hand is. So it's your right hand. So it's the one that's away. So bring your right hand up and put it here beside your face, because what that movement does is it helps people see my face, because we read from left to right. And then drop that hand into the camera view, the visual range. Now move in slowly, slow, slow, slow. What we're going to pretend is the other person shakes your hand and shifts into hand under hand. And so now I'm going to shift myself. So my person is standing right here. I'm going to shift myself so I'm on their side in that supportive stance. So I'm going to demonstrate it with my creature. I have a creature here. So this is my creature. My creature's sitting. Some of our people have like standing up creatures with movable parts and stuff. I don't have that. So I want you to do this with me as we go through. We go knock, knock, hey. Step back a little bit. I put my hand forward. I move in slowly. I shake and I shift. And so now I am in that supportive stance with my person. So here's the problem. So drop down into the chat. Oops, I'm breaking apart my screen. Some of the things that you think you already kind of automatically do about this approach, and some of the things that might take a little bit of practice with this approach. Just drop it in the chat. What kind of things do you think are going to be automatic, and what kinds of things do you think are going to take a little bit of practice?
The shift to the side will take practice. Drawing attention with verbal communication.
So just kind of saying, hey, and then not going into, hi, I'm Melanie, I'm here to help you, that verbal diarrhea stuff. So using that one powerful word, which might be, hey, or it might be Rachel, or it might be Susan. Do you see what Susan did? She looked at me when I called her name. Suzanne's looking at me like going, don't say my name, don't say my name, don't say my name. You don't need to say my name. Suzanne, hey. So we get that person's attention. What else are people dropping in the chat?
Putting the hand up, I will need to learn this.
Yeah.
Clearly, I need to learn my left from my right. To greet face to face and offer a handshake or greeting is automatic.
So
Someone else mentioned the hand by their face.
yeah. So Zoom world is so contorted that sometimes Zoom world looks like this, and sometimes Zoom world looks like this, and so everybody is forgiven for left and right issues on Zoom. It just is just a different world.
So somebody's wondering if the person you are approaching has been hit before, might they think you will hit them with your hand up like this?
Great question. So let's look at what it might look like. So because that has been an issue for me before. That's why I've done some adaptive. So I am starting from at least 2 arms length, 6 feet away from the person. So from 6 feet away, can I hit somebody? I mean, my arms aren't that long. I can't actually physically touch the person from 6 feet away. So from 6 feet away, I can't touch that person. So my hand is here. So the important thing is that now I'm here. The important thing is I get my hand into this position before I start to move forward. So do it with me. High, pause. Let's see. High. I can't remember. Put your hand here. Offer it forward. Pause and then step. So it's hand, forward, pause, and then step. Because where it really truly does look like you're going to hit the person is when you start moving forward like this. And that absolutely looks like you're going to hit the person. And I learned that when people would kind of startle. And, you know, I'm just kind of not really a threatening kind of person. I mean, people who I'm just not intimidating. I'm like on a good day, kind of 5 feet tall. I'm not a scary person. So when I was noticing that people were starting to flinch a little bit as I was approaching, it meant I needed to change something. And the change that I made was the high, forward, pause approach, which with the new change is high, forward, pause, and then approach. So I'm seeing all kinds of other things in the chat. What's going on in the chat, Rachel?
So someone's wondering, would it help if you do a waving motion when your hand is up? So more like this.
So that's another great question. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to do this around your eyes. So everybody kind of put your hands around your face like this, because the visual field of people who are either experiencing brain change through dementia or experiencing brain change because of stress or distress narrows down. So whereas, let's kind of start before that. Everybody put their hands out like this, wiggle your fingers. Don't move your head, don't move your eyes. If you're under age 25, you can probably see your fingers. Most of us those days are gone. And so we have to move our fingers forward a little bit. So I'm gonna actually ask Suzanne and Susan if they'll do this with me again. Because I think it helps if people see more than one person doing it. And Rachel can do it as well, or Rachel can monitor the chat, whichever she. So that's the visual field. So if you move it down to 90 degrees, so it's kind of a right angle, that's the visual field of most 75, 85-year-old people who don't have dementia. So that becomes this. So put your hands kind of around your mask, kind of around your face, like you're wearing looking through a porthole, or like a sea monster. There was that sea monster movie, the cartoon, and they had fins like this. So that is kind of the normal vision of older people. So I hope everybody's doing this with me. Then it moves into this when people are either really stressed or they're in early dementia. So these might be people with dementia who are still out there driving. Now move into this. So this is someone who is really so focused they can only see part of the world, or people who are living with dementia, kind of at that part of dementia where, particularly for Alzheimer's disease, they're remembering the way things used to be. So when I'm looking for my son, I'm not looking for the college student, I'm looking for the toddler. It actually gets different. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. It gets to the point where people can see things but not interpret them. So cover one eye or close one eye and keep your hand around the other eye. That's the visual field of people who are kind of in that state where they will do this with me. Kind of come, lift your heels off the ground. So don't stand up on tippy toe, but just lift your heels. Now bend your knees. Now pull your shoulders towards your knees. Now kind of walk. So those are people you see walking around. They don't have a lot of arm swing. They're kind of moving around like this. And then the last state, kind of close this eye. Spend a lot of time with that eyes closed. Now turn to the side and open that eye and just see how long it takes you to figure out what you're looking at. Now close that eye and look straight down. And it takes a while, and then close that eye and look straight up. And it's kind of scary. And what if there were a face there when you look straight up and you opened your eye? What if there were a face there? Would you like that or not so much? I'm thinking not so much. So this gets back to that question about waving. So
Melanie, you did not warn us that this was going to take so much coordination.
it takes a lot of coordination to have dementia. You're getting your workout in as well, right? So put your binoculars on and kind of lean in close to the screen. I'm going to ask everybody to do this. Kind of lean in close to the screen. Now close your eyes. And keep your hands around your face. Keep your hands around your eyes. Now open your eyes. Okay, what was that like when you opened your eyes and I was waving?
Was a surprise.
Good surprise or confusing surprise?
Want me to be honest?
Yeah.
It was a little bit confusing.
So a little bit confusing. So what are people dropping in the chat?
You got startled, startling, invasive.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So this can be a little overwhelming when you've got this visual field. And so that's why I don't do this. So that I would consider to be a variation. That I would consider to be a variation. So there might be some people, if I'm far enough away, I might do this, but I'm going to be really careful about it. And only it's a variation for a specific, that's that individualization of the approach based on other things. And I'm seeing some other interesting things drop up in the chat. What did you notice?
Yeah, so we had creepy, not sure something is wrong, or you're saying hi. overwhelming in the other's personal space.
Okay, personal space. And I thought I saw somebody drop something in about the handshake and it being culturally acceptable or culturally.
Yeah, they said in some cultures, a handshake is not considered an approach. So this would be important to know prior to engaging with someone from a different culture.
Yes. And so definitely being aware of that. And that would be another individualized modification. For some people, certain genders shake hands and other genders don't shake hands. That if a man touching a woman would not be permissible and acceptable. So there are all kinds of variations and things to be aware of. So other things in that chat I need to know about? What about if we go up a little bit when people were there were some long responses up there. Let's see if I can get up there because I saw some things up here.
Well, someone said that she always knocks on her residents' doors before she goes in, and then she usually waits until they respond back, and then she slowly goes in and approaches them from the front.
Yeah, so nice. So those are really important pieces to build on the skill. Yeah. So we're going to sit back down because, oh, aren't we so much more comfortable? Not always, but sometimes sitting.
Someone just made a good point that this is really bringing light to knowing the person you are approaching.
Yes. And so I use this approach as part of my assessment. And so what I mean by that is I'm going to stand back up, and Rachel, if you'll work with me just a minute. So if I'm standing up and Rachel is sitting down, and Rachel and I know each other pretty well, but Rachel, today you're having a really bad day and you don't want to be bothered. Okay. You're having a really bad day and you don't. So I don't know Rachel's having a really bad day. I don't know Rachel doesn't want to be bothered. I don't know that something in the environment or something in the way the day has gone or something on TV or something has triggered Rachel in a negative kind of way. So Rachel, hey. Rachel.
What?
Oh, what? Okay. It's Melanie.
What do you want?
You want to know what I want? I was wondering.
You're always wondering.
Yeah, it does seem like I wonder a lot, doesn't it? It doesn't seem like a good day, Rachel.
No, it wouldn't.
It's not a good day.
No.
Hey, Rachel.
What?
Would some music make it better or worse?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
Let's try it.
Well, don't do the wrong one.
Not the wrong one. What would a right one be?
I don't know.
Okay, give me a second.
They just don't do it.
Just not anything.
They just don't do it.
They don't do it
No.
the way you want it.
And then they came and they took it away.
Hey, Rachel, they took it away.
They took it away.
Oh, Rachel, I'm
And
so
they don't care.
they don't care.
No.
Hey, Rachel. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once
was lost, but not.
now
Was born, but now I see.
Thank you, Rachel. That was unexpected and lovely. And I am so sorry. One of the things we teach is I'm sorry. I am so sorry. You should not have been subjected to my singing. I was hoping and praying Rachel would jump in faster, but she didn't. And now I'm annoyed with Rachel because Rachel sings beautifully and I don't. So drop into the chat if you think
So
about,
Melanie.
Yeah.
You had an interesting comment.
okay,
Said,
about my singing.
no, not about your singing. I liked your singing, by the way. You're not being engaging with Rachel, more standoffish, body language and facial expressions.
So I'm going to ask that person to drop a little bit more in there. So was it the whole time or was it when I was frantically trying to pull up something on YouTube? So that was Kimberly.
In the very beginning.
In the very beginning. And you're absolutely, that was truly my mistake because I thought I could pull up something quick on YouTube and play some music because I know what kind of music Rachel likes. And that was my mistake. I messed that up. I shouldn't have tried to find something on YouTube in that moment because that didn't work. It was not connected. I wasn't engaging. How did that feel to you, Rachel? Were you aware of that going on or something else?
Well, I was kind of upset, so I wasn't really paying that much attention to you at that point because right then you were being more annoying than anything because you kept bothering me.
Yeah.
I wanted you to go away and leave me alone.
So right then you wanted me to go away and you didn't want me to be there. Oh, somebody else has thought it on Team Melanie and thought it was
she thought it was intentional to appear less intimidating.
Part of that was, so part of it was in that what we would typically do is say, oh, Rachel, what's wrong? You're having a bad day. But what is Rachel kind of demonstrated? So Rachel, I'm having a bad day. And you approach me and you don't have to do, you have to do the physical part. So kind of stand up and I'm having a bad day.
Melanie.
What?
Melanie, it's
What?
Rachel.
They got it and they won't, and it's not where it's supposed, and they just, all of them are just where it's just the way they ought not to do it.
And they shouldn't do it. And then it went away.
And it's just all of them.
All of them.
I'm gonna pause. So Rachel, so everybody put up 5 fingers on each hand. 5 fingers on each hand. So I'm gonna ask Susan and Suzanne. Y'all didn't know I was gonna make y'all work today, did you? Y'all are trying to return emails. No, they're not. They're really here. I know y'all. I can tell by the way you are when you come on here. So 5 fingers up like this. Now put those 5 fingers together. And everybody who's watching can do this. Does that feel pretty comfortable? Yeah, they kind of match up. So now take 5 fingers on this hand and 3 fingers on this hand. And I don't care which hand it is. And I don't care which fingers you use, just 3 fingers and 5 fingers. And now match them. And how does that feel? Does that feel as comfortable or does that feel, it feels off. It feels kind of not exactly right. So now take 3 fingers on this hand and 3 fingers on this hand, any hand, I don't care which hand. Now match them up. Does that start to feel kind of more symmetrical, more balanced kind of? So what you saw Rachel and I doing was matching. So when Rachel, was this, I then was this. When I was this, Rachel then was this. So it's kind of matching that energy, matching those emotions. And that kind of let me know that Rachel was there with me and got me. If she had been looking at her phone trying to pull up YouTube, I would have said, well, you're just like the rest of those huzzy tramps, and thrown her out. But she really connected. So with Rachel, I spent more time with the feelings than I did with the facts. So take a moment and reflect with that. It was more about the feelings than the facts. Because if,
Melanie,
yes,
I'm wondering if it has to do with the energy, because I was kind of clipped. I mean, you know me, and so you know that I'm not going to answer that way unless something's wrong. And so it's like, what? No, just this really clipped, curt, short, and to the point, kind of like leave me alone. And there were long pauses. And so I'm wondering if maybe you taking long pauses and giving little bits was actually matching me and matching where I was. Because if you've been like, okay, Rachel, what's wrong? Well, you said this and that, then I would have just been like, so I'm wondering if it has to do with you were doing this matching thing. It wasn't so much you weren't engaging with me. Yeah, you tried to do the video and the video doesn't work, but you let that go. But I wasn't needing that. And you realized that's not going to work right now.
Mhm.
But I wasn't like mad that you were taking time. In fact, I probably liked it better. So you're picking up on, and I'm wondering if it maybe that would help people see that it's the pacing and it's the energy level, and so we're matching where the other person is, maybe.
yeah, I think that's a really good point, Rachel. That was another way of kind of matching. It was another way of kind of matching, was having that space and that time to give you a moment. What did I do physically? Did I keep standing or did I sit down? Or why do you think I sat down, Rachel?
Well, you were sitting down. Well,
Well,
I was sitting down.
you were sitting down. So when I started, I was standing up. And then I kind of sat down, and that was another way of matching, right?
Yes, Holly's saying eye level to engage.
Yes.
Not.
Yeah. So that was another way of kind of matching you and your energy and your where you were in the situation. So that was another way of matching. So what song did I choose, and why do you think I chose that song, Rachel?
You picked Amazing Grace, and you picked something that was on the slower side because a happy fast song would not have done the trick. And you didn't know at that point whether music was even going to work. But picking something slower, picking something from church that you knew would be important, something that was very familiar, you're hoping that the song will bring some comfort, and like someone saying, pretty much everyone knows that song.
Yeah. So it kind of was a song that a lot of people use. You were talking about somebody being gone, somebody being taken, and that song is really often used at funerals where somebody is gone and somebody has been taken. I didn't know if that's what you were thinking about or not. But I gave you that opportunity, and eventually, thank you, Rachel, you started singing with me. Then we were doing something else. What else were we doing?
We're rocking back and forth.
We were kind of rocking back and forth. So everybody do this with me, just kind of rock back and forth. And have you ever been able to have a good argument sitting in a rocking chair? And I'm betting most of y'all will probably say, no, you can't have a good argument when you're sitting in a rocking chair. And that's really true, because rocking does something to the vestibular system, kind of inner ear, that fluid kind of sloshing around and rocking around actually is calming and soothing. That's why we bounce babies, and why we rock babies, and why we should rock each other and rock ourselves. Because it helps with kind of that vestibular function. So somebody said, yeah, and I rock standing in lines. I'm a very bad waiter. I'm terrible at waiting. And so a lot of times when I'm waiting, I just kind of will rock myself, because it just kind of helps me soothe and be less impatient when I'm in this situation. So I did several things, and I did them intentionally. Not being able to find the YouTube, accidentally worked out to be pretty well. And you're right, Rachel, I probably wouldn't have tried that had it been, if you've been very at a higher level, expressing a higher level of distress. So I didn't move in, I gave you the room because would approaching you at that point have been helpful or not? I'm thinking probably not. So I gave you the space that you needed. I slowed my speech. I sat down, I started rocking, I started torturing you with my singing. And
The other thing you did, or another thing, was you used my name. And you actually used it several times in the beginning.
mhm.
I think it was like 2 or 3 times, and it was a pretty clear Rachel.
Right. So it was a clear Rachel. And what did that do for you in all of your distress?
It catches your attention because you're kind of like, what?
You're kind of like, what? Yeah. So it got your attention. So this is an example of one of the approaches that we can use with trauma-informed care. So the problem is, one of the challenges is people will often wait until too late to do it. So they'll wait until it's already a problem to do it. So I encourage you to do this all day, every day. And what people will tell me that when I do this kind of training for specific communities or other kind of hospitals or other kind of situations, people will tell me, "Oh, Melanie, we don't have time to do this. You obviously don't know how many people we've got to take care of, how hard we're working." And so let's go back and look at that. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to share my screen again. We're going to look at the two approaches again, and we're going to look at how much time they take. And so we are starting at 2:17 for this one, right? So I'm going to ask you to write these down. 2:17.
Hey.
And then 2:35. So you got that? So who's good at math? That's like 18 seconds, right? Is that right? 18 seconds. So 18 seconds. And let's see how long the other one took. So
Hey.
2:42.
Hey, Matthew. Hey, Matthew. Hey. Oh, what? Oh, I'm sorry. What?
2:54. So we're talking a difference of 18 seconds and
12 seconds?
12 seconds. So who thinks ultimately the second approach is going to wind up costing that care partner time? That second approach of touching him without his attention. Who thinks that is ultimately going to take that person longer to recover? You can just drop it in the chat. So
Yes.
I say yes. So we're going to do that. So we have
Even more in paperwork.
exactly the documentation, and then calling to get him some drugs, because the calls that I get are always, I'm a nurse practitioner, the calls I get were always, "Can't you give him something?" So then you've got to transcribe a prescription. I mean, all those kinds of pieces go in there together. So you've got the documentation, you've got the phone call to the primary care provider, you've got all of those things. And it's not a fun way to spend your time. So we have talked about a lot of things already, and we're only about halfway through. We've talked about a lot of things. We've talked about some vision changes. We've talked about some approach changes, a lot of kind of motor things. I'm going to ask if Suzanne and Susan will kind of come back on for a minute. I'm going to ask, can we take a 10-minute practice break and still be okay with CE?
Absolutely.
Okay, because I'm thinking if we just keep talking and we don't get some time to practice some of these motor skills. I'm going to give you some specific assignments. So I'm going to set my clock for 10 minutes. Now, did I say return emails during this time? I did not. We're going to go in, we're going to check the timestamps on your emails and make sure that you do not email. We're not actually, I don't have that power. I don't know that y'all have that power. So this is really time to go and practice. So I've got 10 minutes on my timer. So that means we'll be back at 12 by the time I finish giving the directions. Probably I'll tell you what time it'll be. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to put on your scuba mat, but look through your porthole, and I'm going to ask you to set your own timer for 30 seconds, and I'm going to ask you to walk around for 30 seconds with this on. I'm going to ask you to walk around for 30 seconds with this on. I'm going to ask you to walk around for 30 seconds with this on. With this vision on, I'm going to actually ask you to go to the bathroom. Now, obviously, you can't meet your basic needs in the bathroom with your hands around your eyes, but I want you to explore that situation, that environment. What does this environment look like, feel like, seem like when you've got this visual field? I'm going to ask you to, if you've got somebody in your space with you, yay, practice the approach. If you don't have somebody with you in your space, I'm still going to ask you to practice it. I'm going to ask you to practice it with a chair or with a door or with an anything. I'm going to put up, after y'all go on your break, I'm going to put up the directions, the steps for that positive physical approach. I'm going to leave those up there so you can come back in and practice. So you've got 10 minutes to practice what life is like with your visual changes, 10 minutes to practice your visual, your physical approach kinds of things. And I will see you back here at 11:47 and we'll keep going. So take your 10 minutes. I'm starting my timer. I'll see you back in 10 minutes. And I'm going to put those directions up for the Connect for PPA.
So Kimberly, Melanie wanted us to practice walking around for 30 seconds. Put on your phone the porthole sort of vision, walk around for 30 seconds, the scuba mask for 30 seconds, go to the bathroom for with your binocular vision, just walk around, see what that's like. And then she put the steps up for the positive physical approach for you to go ahead and practice with someone in your space or a chair or just any object. So go ahead and give this a try. It's 10 minutes to practice.
Thanks, Rachel. I was having trouble finding that while I was sharing. Thank you. So we'll be starting back in just a minute. There goes the timer, 10 minutes. So we'll be starting back. So welcome back. So I'm going to ask people to drop into the chat some of the surprises that you got with walking around with your binoculars or your scuba mask, or being in the bathroom with your binoculars on, or some of the things that were surprising when you were working on the approach. What were some of the surprises?
One person said frustrating,
So
like me without my glasses.
yeah, it's a great example. And I wear contacts, and so when I don't have my contacts in, my brain is really fuzzy. And so I think about it for people living with dementia who might not have their glasses, or might not have their contacts, or might have this change in their visual field.
Yeah, you're getting some good reactions. So you have limited vision, tunnel vision, so many things you don't see around you. It was annoying, confined.
Yeah, so all things that I can absolutely see where you came up with some of those responses. So anybody, does that kind of give you more of a sense about why being aware of these vision changes and being conscious of how we approach people might make a difference? What are you going to try as you move forward with this practice?
Well, people are thinking about that. Somebody had a question that they sent in. They were wondering if you would adapt your introduction or communication in any way when you're entering into a room with multiple people or a congregate setting, especially if the other people around tend to be more talkative than the person you came to see.
So that's a great question. So I am entering into the person's space, and there's kind of a quieter person, and there are a lot of other people who are talking. How would I adapt that? Well, I still want everybody to know I'm coming in. So I would do this and do this. And how would I make sure that person knew I was coming in to talk with them? What worked really well for you, Rachel?
Well, name right there.
So I might really make sure I use that person's name. I might really make sure I get to within that person's visual field. And it might mean that I'm on the other side of a table, or it might mean, but then I've got to kind of keep that person's attention as I'm moving through this space where I can actually kind of closely interact with them. Great question.
So people are sending some comments.
Yeah.
It makes you aware of vision changes. Auditory changes are important too. Yes, it does. More aware of startling someone or avoiding it. Yes, I will know how to approach people. Never thought about it from the other person before.
Well, cool. So it looks like we're chatting now.
Yes, it's working.
Oh, yay. That's really cool.
It is.
Yeah. So I thought it might be interesting. I hadn't planned to do this, but I thought it might be interesting to show y'all where this part of the brain is. So I actually have another slideshow I'm going to pull up for just a second. And this is the occipital lobe, which is way back here, which is the part of the brain where that vision is processed. So information comes in through the front, it flips over, it goes to the back, and then once it goes to the back, your brain puts it together so we can actually see in 3D. So what happens with people living with dementia is not that they can't see out of this eye or see out of this eye, it's that their brain can't put things together. And I also said I would mention something that is common, that is this visual field, but an additional kind of change. So let's say Rachel is my care partner. And let's say that Rachel comes into, she knocks on the door, and I say, yeah. And she comes into the bathroom. And when she comes into the bathroom, this is what's happening. Now, what would your instant response be, Rachel? Your non-pat.
Melanie, what are you doing? That's
Well,
not what that's used for. Here, give that to me. No, that's not what you do. Here, no, Melanie, be nice. No, hang on. Here, use
You
this. No,
can't.
Melanie, be nice. No.
Pause. Okay. So what was your initial kind of visceral reaction? Just drop it in the chat. What did it feel like when you saw me brushing my hair with a toilet bowl brush? It actually really makes it really shiny though, if you look at it.
You're getting some strong reactions, Melanie. You've got yuck, eeks, shocked, horror, bacteria. No was sad for you.
Oh yeah. So take a deep breath because y'all went, danger. Pull back a minute. Use this part of your brain. Pull back a minute. Yes, this is my personal toilet bowl brush that has never been in my bathroom ever. I bought it specifically for this role play, although an OT friend of mine wouldn't eat at my table when she saw I had a toilet bowl brush in the thing. I also have a fly swatter that has never been used on a fly. So I have many, many things. So I love that. I would take lunch and get the nurse.
Get the nurse. You have some other people that said that one seems to be clean. It's okay if it's yours. Another person said it's okay. You want pretty hair. Another person said it's clean. Another person said time for a shower.
Yeah. Okay. So where did this get dangerous? Is this dangerous? Is this going to really hurt me? Not really, right? So this is not dangerous. When did it get dangerous? Who made it dangerous? Was it me or was it Rachel? Yeah, so when Rachel tried to take it away from me. Now, what label would y'all give me if I'm trying to hit Rachel with a toilet bowl brush? What labels might I get if I'm trying to hit Rachel with a toilet bowl brush?
Combative.
Ooh, lots of
aggressive during care.
A lot of aggressive and combative and stuff. So I'm going to have you take a deep breath and I'm going to have you change some words. Words are so powerful. Words are so powerful. I'm going to have you take a deep breath and change some words and change the words from aggressive and combative to Melanie's communicating. Because what am I communicating to Rachel? What did you understand me to be communicating to you, Rachel?
This is mine. Leave me alone. I'm combing my hair. Don't take it. It's mine. I'm using it.
So I was communicating, this is mine. You can't have it. And I was communicating pretty well, right? So let's try it a little bit of a different, and we don't know where this toilet brush became so precious to me. You know, we don't know if this is based in some trauma of loss, and maybe it is. When I moved into this care community, what happened to my stuff? All of my stuff, or most of my stuff, or a lot of my stuff was left behind me. And now this stuff has become really important and precious to me because it's mine. So let's take a break and let's try it a little bit differently. Same situation, Rachel not, she asked for permission to come, or I said, come in and try something different, Rachel.
Melanie, hey.
Well, hey, sweetheart.
Hey, it's Rachel.
Well, yeah, it is.
Hey, oh, you're busy.
Yeah, I've got this.
You got this?
Yeah.
Hey, Melanie?
Yeah.
Look right down there. Look right down there.
Well, that one's.
Try that one. Here. There you go.
Oh yeah.
There you go. Oh, nice.
That one will get it with it. That'll
do the trick.
Yeah. Oh, the trick. Yeah.
Yeah, look at you.
Yay. Because this vision changes is there are a lot of, now there are a lot of hairy things, but there are a lot of things in my bathroom that have handles and have brushes, and you can see where they might get kind of. So Rachel, you got this very nicely, might I add. How did you get it from me, Rachel? What did you do?
There you go.
So you substituted something. So you pointed my attention. And then what's my problem now?
Well, you have two things that look alike. So which one do I use for what? So I just drew your attention to a different thing, got you interested in that one, and then you could only hold on to one thing or use it. And so that
Yeah.
I was helpful.
Left-handed is not good. And so what the difference between me giving you this and you taking that is infinite. Excellent. So that's that other visual change. So let's go into some of the other things that I had planned to talk about, some trauma specific kinds of things. We're building on some of these skills. So if we go back to this idea of some of the impact of trauma, it might be it changes our responses to care approaches. So we've seen that demonstrated a couple of times, that when I was approaching Matthew, when Rachel was approaching me, it impacted my ability or Rachel's ability to, or Matthew's ability to kind of respond. It might be a trigger related to something about the care partner demographic. So it might be my gender. It might be I approach somebody and my gender impacts them. If I remind that person of their mother and their mother was verbally and physically or sexually abusive or emotionally abusive, that person's not going to respond well to me. So it might be the fact that I'm a woman of a certain age. It might be age, it might be gender, it might be race, it might be any number, it might be accent, it might be any number of things that might trigger that person. And it also might be the environment. Somebody mentioned earlier in the chat the Holocaust survivors, and that there are really some intense environmental triggers that have to do with showers and bathrooms and closed spaces, and those are really powerful. And we being aware of those makes a whole difference. And then that leads to things like labels. So I am going to get labeled, Matthew's going to get labeled, Rachel's going to get labeled as aggressive or combative or trying to be softer, resisting care, but none of those things are really going to help any of us really connect and be able to work together. And it could even lead to things like medications. It could even lead to things like isolation. It could even lead to things like long-term unmet needs, which can create more trauma and less support in responding to those traumas. So here are the brains of comparison. So if we look at this brain of an older person, this brain of an older person who died from Alzheimer's disease, if you compare those two brains, it's really clear what a lot of the differences are. So just drop into the chat, what are some of the things you see that are different between those two brains? And you don't have to use anatomical and neurological language, just what do you notice is different?
Size is different.
Yeah, and it's actually going to shrink down to 1/3 of the size of a normal brain, because it doesn't just shrink from the outside, it shrinks from the inside as well. What else are some of the other things?
Atrophy, the color is darker.
It's darker because as those brain cells collapse, there's inflammation and irritation. So that's a very distressed, inflamed brain.
There's a lot of gaps, more
And
space in between. There's tissues that are dying.
Yeah, the gaps in spaces, because as those brain cells die, they collapse. As they collapse, they leave behind space. That space fills up with fluid. fluid is really important. We all have fluid in our brain, and it's a passive agent. It's not an active agent. So it's really clear to see that this person is going to interact with the world in a different way than this person is. So when we start to think about how people living with dementia process information verbally and visually, and their impact on not just the structure of the brain, but the chemicals in the brain as well. So if you look at these pictures, this is, so the other thing to mention about these brains are these were matched people. So they were people who both donated their brains when they died. They were matched. So they were the same gender, the same age, they were the same size, they were the same head circumference, they were matched. So the only reason for difference is disease. So these people across the, oops, I don't know why that keeps doing that. Across the top is one part of the brain in 4 different people. Across the bottom is another part of the brain in the same 4 people. So this is the normal brain. This is early Alzheimer's. This is late Alzheimer's and an 18-month-old baby. So if you compare these two, you see a lot of similarities. When you compare these two, you see some similarities and some differences across the top and across the bottom. Now, let me be really clear. Even though this person with late Alzheimer's, dang it, shares some similarities between the 18-month-old baby, I'm not going to treat that older person like they're an 18-month-old baby. I'm going to simplify, but I'm not going to babyfy. So I want to point out some important things when we start to compare some parts of the brain between the normal person and the early Alzheimer's. This is the person without active brain change. This is the person with early brain change. So I'm going to start by kind of focusing right there on that part of the brain. That is your prefrontal cortex, and it's got some really important skills that it's in charge of. It's actually in charge of 6 things. It's in charge of, do this with me, reach out and go, whoa. So it's in charge of impulse control. It's in charge of kind of controlling your impulses. My impulse is to strike back out, but I shove that down and I don't do it in this situation. So impulse control. It's in charge of, do this, being able to make choices. So to choose between this or this. So I can choose between these 2 things, choosing these things. Another skill this brain has is taking in lots of information, coming with a logical, reasonable, rational decision. So being able to take lots of information and coming up with a approach that makes sense. The next one is the ability to kind of initiate and sequence and terminate and transition. So the ability to get started, stay on task, finish what I'm doing, and go do something else. The last 2 are kind of important for our talk about trauma, because the last 2 are the ability to look at a situation and to understand the situation and to kind of go, I can handle this, or I need help. And so for that person living with dementia, or for that person who's really stressed and this part of their brain is not working very well, I look at the situation and don't realize this might be a trigger for me. This is a loud, noisy place. There's a lot of movement going on. I need to move to the side of this space, or I need to remove myself. So the person who has dementia might not be able to do that. The other person who might not be able to do that is the person who the trauma was so intense that what happens to them is really that reflexive trigger. They don't have that moment of reflection to go, this is not good for me, I need to leave. It just happens simultaneously. And so they don't have that. So then the last one is the ability to see my perspective. I think this is dangerous, to see somebody else's perspective. I'm just trying to help. For this person who's just trying to help to be able to move around to see my perspective of this is dangerous, to be able to see it from my perspective and to be able to change your approach or your expectations based on what my view of the situation is. And I think I saw in the chat earlier, somebody put in that seeing it from that other person's perspective is really powerful and important. So I saw in the chat, oh, great question. Giving dolls to people and talking with them like a child. So we talked about rocking, right? We talked about parenting. And if I have spent a lot of time taking care of children in my life, taking care of a child, is that an adult activity or is that playing? So if I'm rocking the baby, is that an adult activity or is that playing? And I'm thinking, what are you thinking, Rachel? Do you think it's an adult activity or do you think it's playing?
I think it's an adult activity.
Yeah, because caring for children is an adult activity. So I am really supportive of people having babies to care for if that's consistent with their life. That gets back to that idea of what's consistent with this person's life. There's a difference for me between a baby or a dog or a cat. They've got those models and it's kind of 50-50 if they're creepy or if they're engaging. And a lot of people living with dementia find them really engaging. There's a difference between that and playing with Barbie dolls. And I'm not saying people shouldn't have that opportunity as well, but that's playing, not working. Although I did have a woman who was a parent who would actually get the Barbie doll, those kind of dolls, and play with them with other participants in a way that was engaging, another different way of engaging with children. So it's an age appropriate to care for a baby for this person, because that person spent years rocking the baby. If you do it well, and if you do it with intention, and as part of that plan, that care plan, that this is a purposeful, meaningful, productive activity for this person. I'm not going to use it with everybody. I don't really like babies. I loved my baby, but I didn't really enjoy that time of life. So that might or might not be okay for me. And so it's individualized, included in the care plan, and then it should work pretty well. So anything else in the chat I need to be aware of, Rachel?
Not really. People are agreeing. But one person did say that their biggest fear in life is having Alzheimer's and being stuck in grief. And they said that witnessing this in our population is traumatic.
I agree. And I'm actually going to pull up another slide, and we're gonna, so you'll have these as resources. We've really talked about most of this. It's just we've done in an integrated way instead of reading PowerPoint slides to you. So I'm going to pull up this thing on empathetic communication, which is for those people who are in distress or are grieving or are kind of revisiting, re-traumatized by things that are going on. And it's a 3-step thing. Now, I do a lot of work at Duke. I'm a clinical instructor there, and I'm on a lot of grants and research projects, and I love the work I do there. And everything they come out with is so incredibly complicated. I like this model because it's got 3 steps. So the first step is to start with those feelings, kind of reflecting back that person's feelings. Oh, you're really angry. You're so worried. You're upset. You're distressed. It's not going well for you. Reflect back those feelings. And the second step is to get more information with, tell me about your mom, or tell me about your home, or tell me about your job. And then the third step is moving from talking to doing. So moving from just talking about home to doing something. Would you help me? Would you try? kind of thing. So let's really see what that looks like. So let's say, what was one of the traumatic experiences for me was having to leave my home. So my story is my husband, my husband died. My family didn't realize how much support my husband was providing in our system until he died. And so after he died, things kind of fell apart. The house is falling apart. I'm not taking my medications right. I've had a couple of little fender benders and accidents in the car. The kitchen is a mess. There's old food in the refrigerator and the new food is in the garbage can. It's just really not going well. And with the resources, with the situation, with what was going on, what made sense was for me to move into a long-term care facility. So I'm living there now, but the traumas of my life were my husband, my partner dying, and moving away with all of my, losing my belongings, my dog, my things. So that's kind of the trauma. So if I'm saying, so Rachel, you want to give this a try? Okay. Hey, I'm not supposed to be here. I need to go home. Hey, listen, I gotta go home.
Melanie, you need to go home. This isn't right. And you're not sure what to do.
It's not right. I don't want to be here. This is not where I'm. They're waiting for me. They need me.
They need you and they're waiting for you. And then
They
you're
are.
here and it's not.
I'm here and I'm no, it's not supposed to be here.
It's not supposed to be here.
It's not.
It's not. Melanie.
What?
Hey.
Well, you're gonna take me home?
You're needing to go home and this isn't right. And
It's
so
not
you said someone's waiting for you. Tell me more.
Well, yeah, I've got 3 of them and they need, it's time. They come in and it's after the day and they gotta have stuff.
Oh, so then maybe they come back and then they're hungry and then you have to give them the stuff because they're hungry and then they get cranky and it's not good.
And they've got to do,
The things they're supposed to do and then the homework and all the stuff and the chores.
Yes.
Melanie,
Yes.
we gotta get them something to eat.
Well, we do.
We do. Come with me. Let's get them something to eat because
let's
this
go.
isn't good. You can't keep them waiting.
No, you can't because they don't have much.
They don't have much.
I'm gonna time. So nice job, Rachel. Everybody give Rachel high fives. Nice job. So you saw those 3 steps that she validated my thing. I don't want to be here. This is not where it's not right. It's not where you're supposed to be. Then you saw she got some more information. She went back and kind of dug in to the children, doing lots of reflection, lots of kind of saying my words after me, lots of kind of repeating things without sounding like she's mocking or parroting me. So repeating some of my feelings, repeating some of my expressions, and then finally, let's go fix something to eat. And she said, they need it, they're hungry. And we went and worked in the kitchen. We get in the kitchen and we're working. Now, what's likely to happen is I'm now concentrating on something else. Am I always going to miss my home and my family? Yeah, because they're my heart. I'm always going to miss my home. I'm always going to miss my family. And that connection that Rachel made with me met some needs for me, because what was the need beyond home and family? What was my need?
Melanie, I can't thank you enough for helping me. Oh, I needed you. Thank you so much. I was needing somebody. Oh, you get the best hugs. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Because in this situation, what I was really missing and needing was something a little complex. So I have 4 P's. I don't know. Have you heard me say this, Rachel? The 4 P's. I've got 4 P's of what people want and need. So the first P is they want or they need a person. So so just drop into the chat. Who do you think are those people they want? Who are they looking for? Who are those people they miss? The people who were gone that leave them isolated and in trauma. Who are the people they need? I see spouse and children and parents. Yeah, I looked at a trauma indicator, and one of the highest scoring things was loss of a child. You know, that having your child die was one, or be abducted or something was one of the highest losses in there. So family, friends, parents, spouses, yeah, people. So the second one is people miss their places. So just drop into the chat. Where's the place that people are often missing, the place they want to go?
Home, church.
Yeah.
Family home, home,
Home, church. Sometimes I
Work.
can go to work.
see their mother.
Yeah. The third thing that people often ask for and about the beach. I'm with you, Cynthia. The third thing that people often mention missing are possessions. So what are some of the things that people are often searching for? Where is my, and just drop some things in the chat. Where is my,
Bed, purse, pet, car, refrigerator, pictures, purse, photos.
yeah, so where's my purse? Where's my special sweater? Pets get complicated because some people put pets in the possessions box and some people put pets in the person box. So I'm seeing some people, I'm seeing some possessions. Maybe there's some places for both, that pets might, depending on the relationship, go in either of those boxes, but those tend to be the things. Home, keys, car, pocketbook. Where is my purse? Where is my money? Or a couple of the ones that, where's my sweater? A couple of those kind of things. And the fourth one is the one that Rachel kind of nailed in the interaction we just did, which is my position. So I want to go home, but going home is, in this scenario, was less about the structure and the building, less about the people, and more about my position as a care partner to these people. So it was really more about, I need to do my job. So I don't want to go home because I want to be in the building. I want to go home because people need me. I'm the mom. I take care of people. So that purpose is really important. So nice, nice answers that y'all have given. So going back to, there's a woman, going back to kind of the question that sent us down this direction. There's a woman named Naomi File, who is a social worker, who was one of the people who really opened my life and my world up to strategies for supporting people living with dementia. And Naomi says that if you have loss and trauma in your life, if you don't deal with it, if you don't process it, if you don't deal with it in a healthy way, cope with it, if you just kind of shove it down and shove it in, then when you get dementia, and I might add on to that, when you start life review, when developmentally you start going back through that time of finding meaning and purpose and value, interpreting and holding on to your life. So that can happen in old age. That can also happen in any time of transition. So that might be some of your younger people who are being admitted, who are processing the losses and the meaning of their life and how this fits together with where they thought and what they were expecting. So what Naomi says, if you don't deal with those well and healthfully and proactively, when you get dementia, I would add when aging, as you're doing reflection during transitions, that starts to come out, and it forces itself out until you begin to really process it. It forces itself out until you have to deal with it. And you might deal with it through this high level of emotional distress that just cycles and cycles and cycles and cycles, unless somebody, as Rachel did for me, comes in and kind of helps sort through some of that and settle that. Now, is it what Rachel did a forever fix? no, because I'm always going to want my home. I'm always going to want my family. I'm always going to miss those things. But what she was able to do is keep it from being aware that this is not right, risky, moving it up into dangerous, where I'm trying to break a door or break out a window or pushing people out of my way who are trying to keep me where I'm best, where I should be, and where I'm best. So that's kind of the long answer to that expression of I don't want to be that kind of person living with dementia. The two answers to that are, one is to deal with loss and trauma and grief throughout your life in healthy, proactive ways, whether it's secondary trauma as part of our job or whether it's core primary trauma, because all of our lives are complicated, to go ahead and deal with that and address that and be a healthy person as you move through your life. Or put yourself in a situation where you've got some really, really, really skilled people in your life providing that support and helping you work through that. So the lady that I was thinking about when we did this role play, her husband had died. Her family was there, but not a lot because of conflicting responsibilities. Home wasn't there. And so what we wound up doing with her was a couple of things. We wound up having some things from home there. That's kind of a common thing. That's part of that person-centered care that someone brought up earlier. So we had some things that were familiar to her, because home also represents a place where things are familiar. So we did that for her, and we gave her jobs. And so her job became to wipe down the tables, because what home kind of meant for her was taking care of people and taking care of things. So that she still missed her home, she still missed her husband, but that made it so she was able to have that sense of being purposeful, of being productive, of things. Somebody put in there who I was and who I am in the world. It gave her meaning for her life. So I see another question. Yeah, their family is waiting in the parking lot. So that's a great one. I would go back to those, tell me about your family. Oh, they're waiting. So could you help me with this? And kind of move into that kind of, oh, what kind of things do they like? Oh, they really like this. Okay, so let's try this with this person. Let's see. Does it more like this or more like this? And so we can kind of get people busy, engaged, connecting. She may always want to be with her family. They may always be out there, but maybe they're not always in the parking lot. So was there another question, Rachel, that I should respond to? I love these questions. So yeah, cool. That was you writing. So let's go back and pick up some of these other things. And again, don't be distressed, because it seems like, or I can ask you not to be distressed, that we're not working through these quite as sequentially as some of you might have preferred, but we're getting to all of the pieces. So this is a tool that we use in PAC, and it's called the 6 pieces of the puzzle. And the 6 pieces of the puzzle allow us to really gather information that is holistic and meaningful, so we can understand what are some of the traumas that might have gone on in their life, and how do we help support them and understand them. So some of these are like things about the person. Who has the person been and who are they now? Includes things like life story. What are the things that were the biggest? And I often during admissions will ask that question. What were the best parts of your life? What were the most challenging times of your life? And how did you get through it? What was the best time? What were the challenging times? And what did you do to get through that? Because people often say, well, I went to my family, or I went to my faith, or I just stayed really, really busy. Because if you're really, really busy, you don't think about it. That helps me understand what kinds of things might help now. The brain change thing is going to really impact how we interact, connect, and approach people. Because if we think about sources of information, and I loved the holistic approach, the first speaker, and I can't remember her name, talked about where you get that information. You get that information from the person, and you get that information from their care partners and some other sources. That family care partner may not know some of those stories because the person may not have shared those stories. That's been a real issue with veterans, particularly of World War I and World War II, is they didn't talk about the PTSD for a number of reasons. They didn't talk about their experiences, and also for some of the other wars that have happened since. So you may have to figure those triggers out based on some of the things in the bottom part of the model. I want to leave in there, don't want to leave it out, that people's physical conditions can put them at risk for having those kinds of triggers be more powerful. So if I'm not eating very well, I'm not drinking very well, I'm not sleeping very well, then some of those traumas may be more likely to force their way through and out. So good health and wellness makes a difference. Some of those bottom kinds of things, looking at those as things we can go to figure it out, include noticing the environment, noticing where does this happen? Is it when the person is alone that they get more distressed, or is it when they're in crowded areas? Is it okay if it's crowded, if it's not noisy, or when it's noisy, is that much worse? Is it inside or is it outside that then things happen? Is it when they're going from one place to another place? Is it the transition? Is it something, a lot of people, and if we start to think about it, the bathroom can be really a trauma place for people. I was working with a gentleman, and I was walking with him, was going to see if I could help him get cleaned up. And when we got close to the bathroom, he started screaming and swinging and no, no, no. And as I explored, I found out that he had a stomach virus, a GI virus. And so he had thrown up all over himself. He had loose stool all over himself. The staff tried to get him cleaned up. He was covered in vomit and feces, and they had to get him cleaned up. And it left it was an awful situation, and it wound up with 4 people and all kinds of bad bruises and experiences, and not because they were bad people or because they weren't compassionate, but because they were focused on the task, which was getting him clean, and not so focused on what that might create in him, which was this strong emotional memory associated with this environment. And so what we wound up doing with him was he never took another shower, because just getting close to the shower room would do this. And some of y'all are going, oh, that's disgusting. He never took another shower. So can people get clean? I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment. Can people get clean without ever taking another shower? Yeah, people can get clean without ever taking another shower. So then the approach became that he got cleaned up in his room, and we modified our approach a little bit. So we went back into this handshake that we saw earlier. So I've got my hand in his hand. His hand is connected to mine. I've got the bath cloth in my hand. And now I can help him clean with him feeling like he's part of it. So, this hand under hand, this PPA approach, if y'all are interested in this, you want to get more experience with that, we have resources for that. We have champion courses where you can participate and get small group work on how to do these kind of approaches and strategies, how to use hand under hand to help somebody brush their teeth. I had a lady who toothbrushing was really a big deal for her because her mom would scrub her mouth out with soap and a scouring pad when she would use profanity. So anybody coming at her with anything to brush her teeth was just not going to go well for her. So I'm gonna just kind of quickly go back to these puzzle pieces, the people around us. So if you've got a care partner who has trauma invoked responses and history of some kind of abuse, or just trying to do their best, but without a lot of knowledge and skills, it can get to be really complicated. The other thing can be time. So that might be time of day that maybe it seems like so many things are worse at night. So many kinds of stressors are worse at night. And I don't know if it's bad things happen at night, or if it's that the dark makes people feel more vulnerable, or if it's that people don't have the distractions around. But time of day, time of life can be another big piece that we have some impact on. So Rachel, I think I saw another question.
Yes, you did. So someone was wondering if you would discuss approaches and interviews for the younger population that they serve to determine their traumas that affect them in the restricted nursing center world.
Yeah, so that is a great question. So with younger people, and I'm guessing either physiological or cognitive or emotional or substance, some kinds of changes are putting them in a long-term care environment that has more restrictions than it does when they're younger. I truthfully use a lot of these same approaches. I actually did some work with a veterans group of people with PTSD and traumatic brain injury. And what we worked on was some modifications of the approach where I may not go, not, hey, when I'm approaching, a young veteran, but I still am going to really, or I actually had some police officers in that group as well who had been in some traumatic kinds of experiences, other kind of first responders, victims of violence. I might not go, hey, but I am going to absolutely positively make sure that person knows that I'm coming. I'm absolutely going to make sure I start in their visual field. Some of the other things that I'm going to try is some of the things that we traditionally do when we sit down and talk to people are often not as effective, particularly with children and younger people. So that me sitting here, you sitting there, having that conversation, I'm asking the questions, we're talking back and forth. Some of that setting doesn't necessarily work. So there's quite a bit of support for not doing it as the activity not being the talking, something else being the activity. So maybe we're playing cards, or maybe we're sorting some tools, or maybe we're doing something together, we're cutting out coupons, we're doing something together, and as we're doing it, we kind of nudge a little bit to see what answers we might get. So that idea of not having talking being the center, but having something else, whether it's a game or whether it's a task, but having something else be, or we're walking instead of sitting. And some of those kinds of things will be helpful, have potential to be helpful with younger people or with kids as well. So I'm going to go back. We've talked about this. I'm going to slip past some of this because some of this we have talked about in some other ways. And I'm going to go down to because we've kind of talked about preferences and values, person-centered care. We've kind of talked about knowing people's life story. We kind of talked about introvert, extrovert with when I was an extrovert, having lots of language, expressing a lot of things, Rachel more withdrawn introvert, how to make that connection with that particular part of personality. These gem states are something we could do a whole 2-3 hour session on, thinking about brain change related to how your brain is processing information, how you're feeling. So this idea that true blue is people who are flexible and able to see other people's perspectives. Diamonds are people who are kind of rigid and like things to be the way they've always been. Emeralds are people who are living in the past. I've got to take care of the children and they're little. Ambers are people who are living in the moment with this one was kind of that amber, don't have a lot of language, but have still a lot of ability to move. Ruby was this one with this one eye and the kind of bit leaning over, running on reflex kind of things. Pearls are people at the end of their lives where you may not get big reactions, but you might get those smaller reactions. Those can be for people we're interacting with, but for ourselves as well. So I wanted to take just a moment and pull out some of these approaches that are gaining experience and becoming kind of interesting. There's trauma-informed cognitive behavioral therapy, which is really looking at really intellectual thinking, intentional cognitive kinds of ways of managing trauma. So it's talk therapy, going through talking about it, but in a way of looking at what's logical and what's not logical, what's feeling, what's reaction, what's reality, kind of pulling those things out. Extended exposure therapy is if someone's had trauma, is really digging into what that experience was over time, pulling it apart, understanding, and maybe even exposing the memories, but it might also move into exposing to the situation. So maybe someone who had a really bad experience and was was raped in a bathroom, won't go into the bathroom, kind of with that support, that pulling it apart, then kind of over time working through some of that to the person can get to the point of being able to do that. The EMDR is really interesting, and that's where you do some talking, but the therapist is kind of changing your focus as you're talking. So it rewires the brain and helps people process better. It's really interesting. Other things, social support, environmental approaches, educating the person. So for that young person, it might be really teaching them about PTSD, teaching them about trauma and how does trauma change the brain and how does trauma impact the brain. So those are some strategies. Some other approaches, we talked about PPA. We demonstrated the hand under hand a little bit. We talked about that empathetic communication kind of piece as well. So I'm going to stop sharing and just mention a couple of other things. There's a really interesting book, and the name of the book, I'm going to pull it up so I can see it because I'm horrible about getting the title right. The name of the book is The Body Keeps the Score. The Body Keeps the Score. And it's a great book about trauma and about understanding trauma and supporting people with trauma. And it talks a bit about some of the things that we can do to support people through and some of the risk factors for trauma. So bringing this kind of back to the population that we deal with in environments that have rules and regulations and restrictions. One of the interesting pieces of information in the book is they did some studies with veterans, and they kind of split the veterans into 3 groups, and they split the veterans into groups who spent with their stories. That's what their stories in. So people who were actively engaged in combat. So these were combat veterans, veterans who were actively engaged in combat, veterans who were in the situation were asked to retreat, so they were pulling out, they were retreating from this event that was dramatic and dangerous. And then the group who were trapped. So some of them were like in foxholes, or they were in a situation where they couldn't get out of that situation. So people who were able to fight, people who were able to flee, and people who were in that fright mode of not being able to escape. And they found that the group that was at highest risk for really developing PTSD were the group who were trapped. The group who could run away or the group who could fight had fewer, still were at risk for PTSD, but were less likely than the people who were trapped. So then it led into other investigation with other groups of people. So victims of child abuse, victims of sexual abuse. And what they found is there really is something about being restrained that really triggers a lot of that either re-traumatization or that original trauma. So I'm going to tell you another story. I got called into the acute care setting. There was a lady with dementia who was saying that she had been raped in the emergency room. And so I went in, I did a physical exam. She did have bruising. She did have bruising on her, her thighs, bruising on her arms, her wrists, bruising on her shoulders. She did have a lot of bruising. And I went back and looked at her records, her notes from her ED stay, and I learned that she had had an in and out catheterization. And I think the picture becomes really clear for all of us what her rape experience was, that people held her down and stuck something inside of her. And that was her rape experience. So it introduced something had happened to her as a young woman. It happened again in the hospital, and the violence of that then took a good bit of work. So finding ways to do something different, to approach people in a different way, to make connections in a different way, to let go of some of the things that feel really dangerous. And I think COVID has really forced us to have these conversations of what really is safe, because what we did at the beginning of COVID to try to keep people safe, many of you were kind of mentioning at the beginning of this session that what we did to try to keep people safe actually created some trauma for people with the loss of relationships and connection and access and those kinds of experiences. So I think it calls for us to really be thoughtful and intentional in how we understand safety compared to risky, compared to dangerous. So we are closing in on, gosh, it's been a quick 3 hours for me. I hope it has for y'all as well. You've been asking questions throughout. So I'm actually going to ask people to drop into, I'm not finished. Go away, Susan. I've got 15 minutes left.
I was going to tell you, you had a good 10 to 12 minutes left. I only need just a couple minutes at the end. You keep going.
Yeah, I'm not going to. Who can mute who? Susan, can somebody mute Susan? Yeah. So I did want to kind of give some time for questions. So you've been kind of dropping questions as we go through things. Did anybody have any specific questions? I'm going to pull up something for y'all to look at while you're coming up with some questions. I want to put this one up because I want us to have a moment to really think about how do you, as a precious, important, vital part of the healthcare system, how are you supporting yourself and your colleagues in the trauma of COVID? I mean, we are dealing with a lot of loss, and I'm working with people who, you know, they've lost people in their family, they've lost people in their professional community, they've lost people of their residents. How are you supporting yourself and your colleagues as we're continuing this? The difference between kind of acute pain and chronic pain, I think we're kind of beginning to experience some of that with this COVID life, that, you know, we've got kind of the acute pain of COVID, and now we've got this kind of lingering, ongoing kind of COVID pain. So I'm going to stop sharing, turn to Rachel. Were there any questions, or did anybody come up with anything they're trying to do to help take care of themselves?
Well, Holly said being able to listen.
So being able to listen to people as they're kind of going through their changes and their goals, and supporting each other and supporting themselves is really important. What else are some things you're doing to try to take care of yourself, and trying to take care of your family, and trying to take care of the others around you?
Well, Kathy just said, well, we are most focused on long-term care residents. I am glad you are acknowledging the need to support facility staff with their own trauma, education, and support.
Yeah, because I think it would be hard to be in healthcare and not to have dealt with trauma, whether it's the trauma of making a mistake that has a bad outcome, or whether it's the trauma of absorbing. And yes, you know, we distance, and yes, we are professional, and but there's this level of, at some level, absorption of the horror that the people around us are really experiencing. So thank you for taking care of yourselves, taking care of each other. So I have another video clip I'm going to show, and I am going to get it pulled up. I pretty much got it pulled up. So now I'm going to take y'all with me. I want to show you this video clip. Now, this is a slightly different situation. This is a lady that I am walking with to the dining room. Now, she's got dementia, but she's pretty much what I would, for most situations, I would describe her as being in that amber stage. So that amber stage is where she's very interested in the things around her. She manipulates the things around her. She's not very interested in something that's over there. She's right now in this moment, in this experience. So that's where she spends most of her time. People in that time of their life tend to start losing weight, because if it's more interesting to interact and engage and manipulate the food than it is to get it into my body, that's how I'm going to spend my time. It's much less complicated. So people tend to start losing weight at this point in disease. So my job was to get her to the bathroom, and get her to the bedroom, not the bathroom, not the bedroom, get her to the dining room. That's where you eat, Melanie. I've been talking for 3 hours. I'm running out of words. So get her to the dining room in a good mood so she would be able to eat. So this is how it goes.
When skies are gray, you'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away.
So far, so good. No evidence of trauma. She actually is doing much better than amber level interaction. She's walking, she's singing, she's engaging, connecting with me. It is going beautifully. No trauma, nothing wrong there. She's going to get down in the dining room. She's going to eat really well, except for two issues. One issue is it's a really long haul. The other issue is I only know one verse of this song and we've sung it a couple of times. So I think I need to try another song or else I'm going to lose her. So I know some things about Susie. I know her faith background. I know her love of music. I know some traditions from both of those things. So I choose another song. So let's see how my other song goes. What else do you know? You know Amazing Grace.
Amazing Grace has reached the one like mine. I once was lost,
Oh no, it's not going so well. So, so Rachel, what did you notice is different about Susie now than when we were singing the other song, Sunshine?
She seems kind of sad, but her movements have just really kind of slowing down, and she feels like she's kind of withdrawing and kind of going in, and so it feels like you're losing her.
Yeah, so she's went from kind of being able to see me and things around her down to being very hyper focused. So I chose this song. I told you I chose this song on purpose. Susie grew up in a church that I'm very familiar with. This is a really common song in this church. Sing it almost every Sunday at the end of the service. We walk down the aisle. We all go out and have lunch. So it made sense to me. And there's another really common time when this song is sung. And so the emotions of this song brought back to Susie. What do you think it brought back to Susie, Rachel?
The funerals.
It brought back
People are thinking maybe another puppy song would have been better.
Yeah, so I probably should have tried a different song. I knew we had this strong cultural understanding relationship, but that culture is multi-layered. And I thought it would work, and it didn't work. So now Susie is grieving. She's reliving loss, and she's re-experiencing trauma. And y'all said at the very beginning, one of the physical things that happens during trauma is people stop eating and drinking. And so I'm going to get Susie down there maybe, and she's not going to eat very well. So thankfully, I know another song. So I'm going to try to make a switch on her. And I'm not going to make the switch with how are you feeling? Oh, you're looking sad. I'm going to make the switch with the music. So if you look really closely, you'll notice a visual cue, a verbal cue, and a tactile cue for Susie.
Do you know Daisy? Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer. I'm half crazy, all for the love of you. It might reestablish marriage. I can't afford a carriage, but you look sweet upon the seat of a bicycle built for two. You're flirting. Yeah, I can't help it.
So, and then we see another side of Susie. And we see not the sad trauma loss side of Susie. We see the beautiful memory of Susie's life as a young girl, because for the first time, she notices the camera. Man. And so now Susie is walking. She's walking sideways. She's got a little hip action, little shoulder action, and she is really connected. And so we've talked about a lot of things about trauma, a lot of things about managing our approach so we don't induce some of that by accident, how we can help people process through some of the empathetic and this validation communication. We're talking about some of these approaches and things. And I think the other piece we leave out sometime is bringing back some of those beautiful experiences. Not to say the bad and the horrible and the traumatic don't exist and aren't important. They absolutely are. We need to process those. And I think we can also use those 5 senses, maybe 6 or 10 senses, depending on who work you read. We can also use what people see and what people hear and what people feel and taste and smell, not just as a way to reduce the traumatic experiences, but also a way to lift up some of those moments of beauty. So we can support people through the hard times by bringing in some of those beautiful times. Susan, you came back on screen. I think you're serious about it this time.
I don't want to cut you off. I could listen to you all day long, but I want to make sure that I have a chance to say thank you very much. Your presentation was wonderful. The interaction and the ability that you have to draw everybody in, even when you can't see them. Because I chose webinar and not meeting. That's what happened. That's why we couldn't see anybody. But fabulous, fabulous presentation. And if I have some follow-up questions, Melanie, I may email you to get some input to answer those questions for people, because you, my friend, are the expert, and we appreciate you so much.
Thank you. And you know, it's kind of plus minus, because the thing about this format is it's much better for people to go back and look at it later. So if you're going to
Absolutely.
do something and show it, you know, this format is much friendlier for that.
Well, and this will allow the people who were there to actually share it with their frontline employees who couldn't be available to watch today, because we had to have somebody taking care of our residents as well, right? So
I really want to thank Rachel for being on and being part of this, because I think those interactions in real time, being able to modify those, are important as well.
all right, thanks to both of you. I am going to share, hopefully, the link in the chat, and there will be a follow-up email. Any input you have for us is invaluable as we create future trainings and topics to discuss with you. Muted myself. Thanks so much, everyone, for I muted myself. You wanted somebody to mute me. Somebody muted me. Hopefully that link takes you to the survey. Any information you can give us is invaluable. And hopefully, Melanie, we